I'll be damned if I cannot dance with you. Come pour some liquor on me, honey, too. It's a real live boogie and a real live hold down. Don't be a come take it to the floor now. I'll be damned if I cannot dance with you. Come pour some liquor on me, honey, too. It's a real live boogie and a real live hold down. Don't be a come take it to the floor now. Ooh. Take it to the floor now. Ooh. Hoops, spurs, to the floor now. Ooh. Top, back, pose. Shoot. Come take it to the floor now. Ooh. And I'll be damned if I cannot dance with you. Baby, pour that sugar and liquor on me too. Spurs, boots, sologenic, photogenic, shoot.
Our hearts are free. So tell me what's wrong with the feeling. I'm a flower, you're the bee. It's the joy that you need. I'm in love, I'm alive. I belong to the stars and sky. Let's forget who we are for one night. Without
We live in a state built on innovation, fueled by diversity, and powered by the strength of its communities. Yet, for far too long, many Californians have been locked out of its wealth and power. For 30 years, the California Budget and Policy Center has worked to break down barriers, making the state budget process more accessible, transparent, and fair.
But don't just take our word for it. Hear directly from our partners.
The Budget Center has been a hallmark part of the Sacramento policy community. It's so crucial that budget advocacy and budget analysis is grounded in community. And the work that the Budget Center is doing, working effectively with partners across the state to take the budget out of the halls of the Capitol and to the people from northern part to our Imperial and San Diego counties is essential.
I've always found the Budget Center to be a convening of like-minded folks who are really trying to move forward an agenda for a better California. They've really become a pillar of all of the advocacy work that happens in human services in California.
As a grassroots organizer and a grassroots organization, we're really focused on identifying the solutions that are impacting our members and building campaigns around that. We don't have a research staff, we don't have a data analyst, and so being able to turn to the Policy Center and all of the incredible researchers and analysts you have, it feels like a partnership. It would really hurt our efforts here.
Congratulations on 30 years of great work. Thank you for empowering our communities. Thank you for all the work that you do to make sure that communities across the state can engage in policy conversations and understand what's at stake with what's in the budget, what's in policy proposals, and just for being an ally to our work. Thank you so much. Happy 30th.
Together, we've made real progress toward a just and equitable California.
The kind of California that invests in healthcare, education, and opportunity for all. The kind of California that prioritizes people over profits, equity over power. The kind of California that protects its most vulnerable and ensures no one gets left behind. With your support, we can make this vision a reality.
What kind of California do you want to live in?
Celebrating 3 decades of impact, please welcome to the stage Budget Center Executive Director Chris Haney.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for being here. Today, we get to celebrate 30 years of impact, progress, and partnerships. This milestone wouldn't have been possible without the dedication of our staff and our board members, as well as our partners, advocates, foundation allies, supporters, and everyone in this room. Thank you for standing with us to advance policies that improve the lives of Californians and for believing in the power of values-driven, independent analysis that you've come to expect from the Budget Center. I want to take a moment and thank the staff of our organization for making today possible and the last couple of days possible. This takes a tremendous amount of work, and while we're at this period, I want to make sure that I get a chance to just thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for all the great work. I also want to thank a special guest who's arrived early. I hope you're all going to stick around for the afternoon plenary. Supervisor Holly Mitchell has joined us here today. Holly Mitchell is my favorite budget chair of all time. And I will just say there are very few politicians I have ever met who I would consider quitting my job and going to work for if they wanted to run for president, so you let me know. When the California Budget and Policy Center, then known as the California Budget Project, was founded in 1995, bringing expert and accessible budget analysis to policymakers, advocates, and communities. Over the years, we've then ensured that the budget decisions start with facts and that the decision-making process is more transparent and inclusive. And we have a perspective, informed viewpoints on what works best. That perspective is not intended to lean left or right, more importantly, it's intended to reflect the needs of the people of California. I remember several early conversations when I joined the organization a little over 12 years ago with partners and funders as I tried to assess, the Budget Center's role in the policy ecosystem. And the consistent theme that I heard was, we do not expect you to tack to the middle for the sake of being in the middle. We expect you to bring the truth, to tell the truth about what works and doesn't work in public policy, who will be affected, and where the state needs to invest in progress. And I believe we've done just that. Together with groups and organizations and people like those in this room, we've helped secure some pretty major policy wins in this state, enacting and expanding the state's first California Earned Income Tax Credit, which now reaches over 3 million households. Advancing Medi-Cal expansions to ensure health care access for all, including Californians who are undocumented. Making the case for justice system reforms that have started to unwind decades of misguided investment in incarceration, primarily impacting communities of color and saving the state money in the process. And more recently, strengthening local advocacy and statewide partnerships through the Budget Power Project, a partnership of the Budget Center, Catalyst California, and the Million Voters Project, and a host of organizations at the local level around the state. And today we're leading the charge on tax and governance reforms to equitably grow the revenues we need and that the state needs to make the scale of investment needed. I want to also note that, like many organizations over the years, we've been on our own journey, our own awakening around the need to center equity in all of our work. And we know that that means being transparent about the people who are affected by the policies that we analyze. It means calling out the historical and structural racism that is embedded in so many of the policy systems and governance structures on which we work. It means making sure that the voices for policy change are the people experiencing the impacts of the policies on which we work. And it means applying the same standards of our external work in our own internal systems and practices. As we look ahead, we recognize that our role in the state is evolving. The Budget Center today is more than a research organization. We are a bridge connecting data to action, research to advocacy, and people to policy. And we're super excited to continue this work with you. As part of our 30th anniversary, we'll be doing a tour around the state to engage communities across California in conversations about California's future, threats to that future, and how people can get involved. So watch for the dates. They're coming out soon. We'll be seeing you in the Bay Area, Fresno, and Los Angeles as part of a tour later this year. Before I close, I just want to take a few moments to say some words about the era in which we find ourselves today. When I started thinking about remarks I would want to give at a 30th anniversary event like this, I was certainly envisioning a different policy and political landscape than the one in which we find ourselves. One where legal residents of this country are picked up off of states and illegally deported, where there are attacks on our institutions from the federal workforce to academia, media, and the courts, budget proposals that would result in an unprecedented wealth transfer, as we talked about at the plenary this morning, taxes on consumers through tariff policies that, in combination with federal budget proposals, could undermine the global economy and therein our state's fiscal health. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that we essentially have 12 months to fight back against a generational centralization of power and wealth. But none of this is a foregone conclusion, and there are pathways to better outcomes, even if they sometimes seem limited. This is an existential fight, and because of that, it requires all of us to throw down in ways that we might not have previously and that might make us individually, organizationally, sectorally, a little uncomfortable. Yes, we have to do the things that are normal, we have to play in our lanes, but we also have to challenge ourselves about what those lanes are. And I've been asking myself a lot over the last few months about my own actions and the actions of the organization and how we want to be remembered for the events that happen in these moments. And I think about how I can use the power that the Budget Center has to then be a disruptor and to help shift power. These are not easy questions, and we're having to try and answer them on the fly while we are fighting the good fights that lie directly in front of us, and it's tiring and it's heavy. And I want to implore all of us to remember just how much we all need each other in these moments. It's not easy work, it's urgent, it can be intensely personal, and we need to have each other's backs, stepping forward when others need to step back, taking care of each other in terms of self-care and our organizational care, and making sure we're in rooms like this in order to build some solidarity and community with each other. So thank you very much for being here with us and an ally on this journey. I know that whatever lies ahead probably won't be easy, but I'm inspired by the work of everyone in this room, the partnership that we have with you all, and the work that we all do to ensure better lives and a more just and equitable California. So it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce Veronica Carrizales, Chair of the Budget Center's Board of Directors and Managing Director of Programs at the California Wellness Foundation. Veronica previously spent 15 years with California Calls, a close friend and ally of our organization, a powerful statewide alliance of community-based organizations spanning urban, rural, and suburban communities across the state. I've had the great pleasure of working with Veronica in her role on the board for over 9 years now. She's terming off soon, so unfortunately that's coming to a close. But she's also been the chair of the board of directors for the last few years, the first Latina chair of the board of directors. And not the last. Our organization is so much stronger today because of Veronica's leadership, and individually I know that I'm a better leader because of Veronica's guidance, her voice, and her support. So please welcome Veronica Carrizales. Thank you so much.
I'm living in that 21st century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen do it. Screams from the haters, got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero need his theme music. No one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. The system broken, the school's closed.
Wow. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? Okay, let's try that one more time. How are you all doing today? Thank you. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you today as we celebrate such an incredible milestone, right? 30 years. 30 years in advancing equity, 30 years in advancing justice and opportunity through progressive budget policy. This milestone would not have been possible without the help of all of you. So I want to say just thank you to all of you for all of the support and the partnership that you've had with the Budget Center. This partnership, this would not have been possible either without our wonderful board of directors. I'm very lucky to have been working as part of the board for 9 years. And I have to tell you, we have an amazing board of directors. We have folks that come from all walks of life, that have come from doing organizing, that have done legislative work, advocacy work, philanthropy. So I want all of our board of directors to kind of raise your hand and say and wave so that everyone can know who they are. Thank you. I made a commitment to be on the board because I wanted to be part of a team that was thinking about progressive policy solutions for the biggest challenges facing our communities, that centered people's first and advocated for budgets that represented our values. The Budget Center plays such a critical role in our movement and power building ecosystem. The Budget Center is a trusted thought partner and an ally that I think all of us can say has our back. I was actually impressed to hear Chris say, we're willing to throw down. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think that speaks to the influence and the partnership that movement and power building groups have been having on organizations like the Budget Center. For 30 years, the California Budget and Policy Center has been our go-to source for translating the complicated language in our budgets. They have been our go-to source for translating and explaining to us what potential tax-related ballot measures mean. When I know all of us are just asking, do we vote yes or do we vote no? But they actually take the time to explain to us what the measure does and why it's important. For 30 years, the Budget Center has been like that policy wonk relative that you call up when you want to understand how Prop 98 impacts school funding, when you want to understand what the implications of the cuts are to SNAP, to CalFresh, when you're sitting there asking yourself, is this tax credit actually a good thing or a bad thing for our communities? And when you're asking, how come I don't get any of those capital gains, right? So this year they pivoted to help us understand the federal budget, and they played such a key role for us. The Budget Center is also a partner in many of our coalitions and has been helping to build the capacity of our movement partners to advocate at the local level on local budgets through the Budget Power Project. As you heard today, we are in uncertain times, and we are navigating uncharted waters. Our democracy, our institutions, our safety net, and for some of us, our very existence is under attack. Right now, these attacks are coming from the federal level, but let's be clear and let's be honest with ourselves. These attacks have come before from within our state, from big corporations that have consolidated their power to influence legislators from voting on progressive policies, that have put ballot measures on the ballot to attack our communities, and that have prevented us from passing transformational changes in California. Now more than ever, we need to stand in partnership together to defend our freedoms. When I look at all of you, I see the beauty and the diversity of our movement. All of you are the change makers that will lead our communities and, frankly, that will lead the nation to that promised land. That's all of you. We're going to do this together. And it's important that now, more than ever, we're consolidating our power. We're coming together across sectors. We're coming together across movements. And we're working in partnership to make progress possible. That means protecting and defending the most vulnerable people under attack: immigrants, the trans community, LGBTQ, Black, brown, poor people. But it also means that we have to be willing to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So that means we have to be willing to lay the groundwork to go on the offense at the same time. Because if we want transformational change, it's going to take multi-years of organizing to be able to do that. And we can do it. Transformational change is possible, but it's going to require all of us if we want to make transformational changes on healthcare, transformational changes on housing, on childcare, and might I say, on corporate and property tax reform. Because we know that transformational change is not going to happen without revenue, right? And the Budget Center is going to be our trusted partner to help us figure out all that complicated tax language so we can make the right choices on these issues. That means all of us need to move in alignment together across sectors, across organizing, across advocacy, across policy, and across philanthropy. And since we're talking about philanthropy, and now that I'm in the sector, so now I work for the California Wellness Foundation, I have a few words to share with my philanthropic colleagues. I want us to be clear about the moment that we're in. Right now is not the moment for us to be protecting our reserves. Right now is the moment. Right now is the moment for us to stand together with community groups. Just like we set high expectations for our grantees, we need to hold ourselves accountable and set high expectations for ourselves. That means philanthropy, we need to get organized. And might I say, we need to get our shit together, right? Our communities need us, and we need to be ready to stand in partnership with our communities. And now is the time for us to do that. So to close, 30 years would not have been possible without the support and partnership of all of you. Thank you for being here today with us. Thank you for all the work that you do and for all the work that we'll be doing together in the weeks and months ahead. Congratulations to the Budget Center in 30 years of building a more just and equitable California. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for celebrating with us. It's time for our next session, State Leaders, New Challenges, and Making Progress for Californians. In this session, we'll hear from the leaders of the Senate and Assembly Budget Committees about how they're navigating today's challenges and their vision for building a stronger, more inclusive California for all. Please welcome Budget Center Policy Director Alyssa Anderson, Assembly Member Jesse Gabriel, and Senator Scott Wiener to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and you're enjoying your day here today, connecting and learning and strategizing. So in this morning's plenary, we talked about the many federal threats that we're facing and what state leaders can do. And now we're going to have a conversation with two state leaders about how they're navigating the challenges of putting together a state budget in the face of those threats, while also still making progress toward an equitable future for all Californians. So I'm pleased to introduce Senator Scott Wiener and Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel. Senator Wiener is in his second year as chair of the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee. He serves on numerous other committees and is co-chair of the Legislative Jewish Caucus. His service in the Senate focuses extensively on housing, transportation, civil rights, criminal justice reform, clean energy, and alleviating poverty. He was first elected to the Senate in 2016 and represents District 11, which encompasses all of San Francisco, where he's lived and been an active member of the community since 1997. So welcome, Senator. And Assemblymember Gabriel is also in his second year as chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. He was first elected to the Assembly in 2018 and represents District 46, which encompasses parts of the San Fernando Valley. He is also co-chair of the Legislative Jewish Caucus and has focused his work on a range of issues, including gun violence prevention, food safety, housing and homelessness, and climate. And he currently lives in the San Fernando Valley with his wife and 3 children, and is an enthusiastic youth soccer coach and long-suffering Cal sports fan. Welcome, Assemblymember. We're so glad to have you both join us today, and welcome back to the conference. So I'm going to get the conversation started with a few questions of my own, and hopefully we'll have some time toward the end to take questions of your own. So if you have questions, please write them down and hold up your card, and people will collect them, or you can put them in the conference app. So let's get started. So you both spoke at our conference last year, and it was your first year serving as budget chair, and you helped to close a relatively large budget shortfall. And you did that while protecting core funding for many essential services. And so to start off, I wonder if you could share some reflections from your first year as chair. What did you learn from that experience, and what are you carrying forward into this year? And Assemblymember, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. So first, let me say, thank you to all of you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for coming up to Sacramento, for making your voices heard, for making sure that we're going to work to continue to build a more just and equitable and moral California. You are here at an important moment, and we're very grateful. So please give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Let me also say thank you to Senator Wiener for his partnership. It was a very interesting experience this first year. When the speaker asked me to serve as chair of the budget committee, I thought I was going to be Oprah. I thought I was going to be handing out all kinds of stuff to folks. But it was actually 2 weeks after that appointment was announced that they announced that the state was projecting a record budget shortfall. And so the job has turned into something much different than I anticipated when we first spoke about it. But what we tried to do last year, and I think we did with some success, as you mentioned, was to address that shortfall, which we have to do, as all of you know, I'm sure. We can't deficit spend like Washington, D.C. We can't print money. We are required by law in the state constitution to have a balanced budget. How could we do that while at the same time making sure we were protecting our most vulnerable communities, making sure that we weren't balancing the budget on the backs of the poor and on those who need our help? And that was a difficult exercise. And it required us to really look very closely at the programs and services that the state is providing to tighten our belt. We had to make some cuts, but we understand that families around the state are having to go through the same exercise. And so we tried to approach it with a lens on what are the programs and services that are really delivering for Californians, where are we moving the needle on the issues that we care about, while at the same time understanding that there are things that we as Democrats value, and those are protecting our most vulnerable communities, and how can we work within a very challenging dynamic but still protect those programs and services that serve our most vulnerable communities.
Great, thank you. And Senator, what would you add to that? What have you learned and what are you bringing forward with you?
Yeah, and also thank you for having me today, and thank you to everyone here up and down the state for fighting on the front lines for so many of our communities. You know, when the pro tem asked me to chair the budget committee early last year, I actually had not asked to be budget chair. I had a long run on the housing committee, which is so much of my passion, but I stepped in with some trepidation because my amazing predecessor, Senator Nancy Skinner, she got to preside over some record surpluses, and then here I come in just in time for a $50 billion deficit. But I quickly realized that actually being part of the budget process during bad years, in many ways, it's more meaningful than in the good years. Yes, it's nice to be able to give everyone what they asked for, but in the bad years, it's when we really have to focus on what is most important and what do we really, really need to protect. And it becomes really a matter of life and death for so many people, like whether people are going to have health care, whether seniors are going to have services, whether foster kids are going to get the support they need, whether people are going to be able to get to work on public transportation, and so on and so forth. And so it's been a hard year, but it's been a really meaningful year. And I think the legislature and the governor did a really good job last year of balancing the budget without having to take a wrecking ball. And we did it on a 2-year basis, so that at least coming into this year, we had a balanced budget. We've now had some challenges with Medi-Cal increases, and then of course we have the Death Star staring at us from Washington, D.C., so that's added a lot of complexity, and it's going to be probably a chaotic year. But during these difficult and chaotic years, that leadership is even more important and meaningful.
Absolutely. And so speaking of Death Star, that's where I'm going next. So a lot has changed since last year. You're now in your second year, but really feels like an understatement because a lot has changed even since January when the governor introduced his budget. So we now have a hostile federal administration advancing radically harmful policies, Republican-led Congress that wants to slash healthcare and food assistance in order to give tax breaks to the wealthy. And then here in California, of course, thousands of people are still reeling from the devastating wildfires that hit the Los Angeles area earlier this year. So how are these new developments affecting how the leadership in each of your houses is approaching this year's budget decisions, and has this changed your priorities?
So I think that's everything you laid out is exactly right. The other thing I would add to it is the chaos with the tariffs and the way that may lead us into recession, and the fact that we have an individual in the White House that I can't figure out if he is pot committed to destroying the global economic order and we're just going to have to live through 3 years of terrible recession and economic contraction, or whether this is going to be some negotiation and they're going to back away from things. But it's a very challenging situation that you described. We are facing the prospect of decreasing federal revenues, and I want to talk about that for a minute. About a third of the money that comes into our budget, roughly, is money coming back to us from Washington, D.C. And I say it very intentionally in that way because California is far and away the largest donor state. We are sending a lot more money to Washington than we are getting back. So the money that we have been getting back from Washington, it's not charity. It is money from hardworking California taxpayers that we deserve to have back here to fund programs and services that benefit Californians. But the idea that we would have a reduction in that money for policy or political reasons, the notion that we may see declining revenues because of all the tariffs and the economic uncertainty, combined with the fact that we have seen growing demand for some of our programs, including Medi-Cal, and then more pressure on our safety net if we do enter a recession and we do enter tough economic times, it is a very, very challenging picture overall. And so we had a conversation today on the Assembly floor. We passed some legislation, some early budget action around the wildfires, around LA recovery, but also to provide some additional resources to Medi-Cal so that it could continue to make payments to providers and hospitals through the end of the year. And we had some of our Republican colleagues step up and make some noise about it and say, oh, well, we want to work with you, but this and that. And I said, what y'all need to do is talk to your Republican congressional friends in Washington and explain to them that if they go along with what has been proposed, it will devastate people in your communities. It will absolutely, and it's not going to just hurt folks. It's not just going to hurt folks, it's not just going to hurt Democrats, and it's not just going to hurt folks in coastal areas. This is going to hurt a lot of people up and down the state, in communities across the state, and we need them to go to Washington and say, this is crazy, and this is going to inflict real pain on communities across California if you follow through with some of this. And we are certainly going to do everything we can to continue to protect those safety net programs for our most vulnerable. I don't believe our priorities have changed. What has changed is the magnitude of the threat. And the threat is profound, because if they make some changes to reimbursement rates in Washington, if they do some things that are within their control, they could absolutely blow a hole in our budget that will be very, very challenging for us to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the budget is always real, right? These are choices that we make under requirement to balance the budget, and we can't always fund everything at the level that we would like to, so it's always real. But at least it's to a significant extent within our control. We make the choices as a state, as painful as those choices are. What is different now is so much of it is out of our control. We always have some control, but like, for example, when I talk to people in my community in San Francisco who are worried that their spouse is no longer going to be allowed to live in this country. I mean, like that level of, and you all see this every day. People who I didn't even realize that they were potentially at risk, because you don't run around asking everyone, what's your immigration status? But now you start to see how many families are impacted. Or when I have parents of trans kids come up to me on the street and say, do I need to leave the country to protect my child? Never thought I would hear someone say that to me. Or like yesterday, we had a hearing in the health committee, and we had a witness. He was a researcher, a very, very esteemed researcher at UC Davis in their primate lab, and they were the team that created tenofovir, which is the reason why HIV is no longer a death sentence for anyone who has access to health care. And it has saved millions of lives around the world, and many in my community. And that lab just lost a huge grant from NIH because we have psychopaths running the federal government right now. And I say psychopath for real, because they have, these people have no conscience. They do not care how many people die, how many people have their lives ruined, how many families are torn apart. They revel in it. They go down to the border with crazy person with her cowboy hat on, and just glorying in ripping people apart. And in the past, we've had some conservative governments that have done, in my view, very, very, very bad things. But to have people who have no conscience about what they're doing and the impact on other people, that makes our work this year profoundly different than in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's go to federal budget cuts and what that means for the state budget. So as you said, about a third of the funds that flow through our state budget come from the federal government. They mostly support health and human services, largely Medi-Cal. And then federal funding is also essential to our safety net and keeps millions of Californians out of poverty each year. But then just today, the House Republicans passed a unified budget resolution that directs congressional committees to make massive cuts to health care, to food assistance. And the scale of these cuts would just be absolutely devastating to millions of Californians. The fight to stop these cuts is not over. The next steps that Congress faces will be difficult, and they pass this with slim margins. And as we talked about in the morning plenary, several members of Congress here in California are swing votes. And so really the path to stopping these cuts goes through California. So I'm wondering, what are helpful ways you've seen state leaders join the fight to call on members of Congress to stop these cuts? And is there more that you think state leaders ought to be doing at this point, given that federal Republicans just took a step closer to making these devastating cuts?
You know, when they passed the 2017 Trump tax cuts, you may recall that the Republican members of Congress in California, not all of them, but some of them, backstabbed their constituents in capping the state and local tax deductions. And Mimi Walters lost her seat because of that vote. That's why, because she picked the cult leader over her constituents, and she paid the price. And so I think these Republicans, particularly ones who represent communities where a high percentage rely on Medi-Cal, on Head Start, SNAP, et cetera, they need to understand that this is not going to fly under the radar, that their constituents are going to know that your kid can't get asthma treatment anymore because that guy, David Valadao or whoever else, voted to take it away. And we also have to make sure they're already promoting propaganda. We had, for anyone who may have watched the Senate Budget Committee hearing yesterday, I got into a colloquy back and forth with Senator Grove who she had said we shouldn't be, cutting health care. And I'm like, well, I agree, but your party is doing that in Washington. And she was like, no, they're saying that that's just made up by the Democrats. They're not touching Medicaid. Well, we know that the math doesn't add up, but they're going to say it. We're not touching Social Security. We're not touching Medicare. We're not touching it, and they're touching all of it, and they cannot be allowed through their, all of the manosphere podcasts, et cetera, get away with that propaganda. So we have to be better about making sure people truly understand not just what's happening, but who's doing it, and there have to be consequences. And if they know that there are consequences, then there's a path.
Do you think there's more that advocates or organizers or analysts could do to help make sure that members of the legislature really understand what's at stake if these cuts go through?
So we've been having very frank conversations internally. I think some of our members understand the gravity of the moment. Others quite haven't grappled with it. And we have a lot of new folks in both houses of the legislature. I think are still trying to get up to speed around all of this. What I keep telling people is who come in to see us is we're sympathetic to a lot of this, but so much of the ball game on the issues we care about is going to be in Washington, D.C. And then we have a conversation about how can we constructively work together to deliver that message to folks in Washington and to make sure that they're hearing the message in the way that Senator Wiener described. I mean, I think it was notable to me that a bunch of these Republicans had to go into the witness protection program over the congressional recess, because there was so much anger in their communities. They didn't want to hold town halls. They didn't want to face the public. They didn't want to talk about some of what they were contemplating in Washington. But we've got to find ways to direct as much energy as we can there. And so I've had conversations with both Republican and Democratic members of the California congressional delegation about this. I've reached out to them and tried to help underscore for them what this is going to mean both for the communities they serve in terms of what they're contemplating, but also how that trickles down to the state budget, right? I think that's another thing that people don't think about, because they will force our hand if they do some of these things. Again, we cannot deficit spend. We're required to make those numbers balance, and we're not going to have a lot of options at our disposal. And then having conversations with a lot of advocates about how can you go to Washington to deliver this message in ways. I had the chancellor of the CSU and a bunch of folks from CSU in my office, and we were talking about, there's some contemplated cuts to the CSU system. And they're talking about, the way the chancellor described it, which stuck with me, she said, we're cutting bone at this point. And I said, I hear you, and I agree with you, but as you know, so much of what actually determines the future of public higher education in California is what's going to happen in Washington. So you are geographically distributed around the state. You have campuses and alumni in all parts of the state with connections to members of all different political parties. They said, you need to go get some of your, Republican alums to call their Republican members of Congress and say, you are going to devastate our beloved alma mater. And all of us, every advocacy group, everybody who has an interest in this needs to be delivering that message to Washington, and just to hopefully hold off some of this, because if they go through with what they're talking about, our options are going to be very limited.
Yeah, absolutely. So top priority, stop these cuts. And there's a lot of really great work being done all across the country to try to stop them. And we've seen it's actually slowed things down, so that's good. But, again, these cuts are not set in stone, but let's assume for a minute that we do see deep cuts to healthcare or to food assistance. How can state leaders minimize the harm to Californians, or what are you thinking about?
I mean, it's so hard because we don't even know what it'll be. We don't know when they're going to do it. They could do it in 2 weeks. They could do it in September, months after we've adopted a budget. We don't know the scale of what they're going to do, right? I hope that they just give up and don't do it at all, and just don't cut more taxes for rich people. But we don't. They may do. There's a massive scale. So they could blow a several billion-dollar hole in our budget, or a 5, or a 10, or a 15, or a 20, and so it becomes so hard to even know. And we have to have those hard conversations about what do you do at this level, at this level, at this level, and on top of all of it, 1/4 of the state, because of the wildfires, will not file for taxes until October, 4 months after we pass our budget. And so it's going to be, I think, a fairly tumultuous, unpredictable year, and I don't want to speculate. I know we want to, healthcare is so incredibly important. We want to do everything we can to protect it, but we're going to have to be nimble in how we respond, because we don't know exactly what they're going to do.
Anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing I'd add is that helping folks, new members and others, to understand that this is not the moment to propose multi-billion-dollar new investments. I had some folks in my office the other day, I think very well-intentioned, who were talking to me about some really multi-billion-dollar new programs they wanted to see. And they said, look, I understand and I appreciate what you're trying to do here. And in a different world, maybe this would be a conversation, but I said, there's a world in which we're supposed to go out of session in mid-September. There's a world in which Scott and I are going to be back here with all of our colleagues 2 weeks before Christmas voting to take away health care from kids. God forbid. But I said this to the advocates because I said, I want you to understand the moment that we're living in. That is not out of the realm of possibility. So what we're going to have to do is link arms and find the things that are most precious and most holy and most sacrosanct, and fight like hell to protect those things. And so this is a moment of real prioritization over those things that we know are going, and to protect communities. And it may be, unfortunately, as terrible as it sounds, how do we minimize the pain? I mean, that may be a moment where how do we minimize the suffering? How do we make sure that we are protecting the largest number of people from the most severe outcomes?
And certainly recognize that the cuts could be massive, but given that the whole goal here of Republicans is to cut the safety net, cut healthcare in order to fund tax breaks for the wealthy, and given that income and wealth inequality in California is so extreme, it will only get worse under these plans if they go through. should state leaders also take a look at, how can we claw back some of the revenue from the federal tax breaks that the wealthy are about to get in order for, to raise state revenue that could then be used to mitigate some of the harm?
So, okay, I'm going to take off my Senate budget chair cap and put on my Scott Wiener from the Castro. I mean, I personally think revenue should be on the table. And I will say that for a few years now in the Senate, we have put out frameworks looking back at the 2017 Trump tax cut where corporations got a 40%, literally a 40% reduction of corporate taxes, and should we be trying to recoup some of that in California? So that I can say, that's been a Senate Democratic Caucus idea that's been out there. We've never really gotten traction for it, and tax increases are 2/3. They're always really hard. But I'm sorry. I think that absolutely needs to be a topic of discussion, and we need to be thoughtful and careful about it, of course. But I mean, they got a 40% reduction in 2017, and so it's an important topic of discussion.
Great to hear. Anything you'd like to add?
I think what I would add there is a couple things. One, that there were some things that were done in the budget last year around pausing some of these tax breaks. That in itself was a challenging lift. There are already conversations, and people want to really dig into all of the different, to look at tax policy and really look at all the different tax credits. And I think we're going to have that conversation and really try to look at it. But for people to understand, and again, I don't want to be overly negative here, but I believe it's polite to be honest, if they blow a $30 billion hole in our budget, if you look at what's out there, there aren't a lot of ways to make all of that up. And so we can have that conversation, and we're going to do that. And I just had a conversation with a number of my colleagues who really want to dive deep on that. I've also heard from a bunch of colleagues who don't want to touch taxes and have no interest in that. And we've got just to be honest, we have a big segment of the Democratic caucus that in this moment where we're having challenges with affordability doesn't want to talk about that. So that's going to be a conversation we'll have, but we also have to understand there isn't a magic tax credit that we can eliminate that's going to be able to remedy some of what we might see from Washington.
Okay. Well, so you touched on the timeline and the challenges of putting together a state budget, given that we just don't know exactly when we might see federal budget cuts, if we might see them. And so, we're only a month away from the May revision when the governor is going to produce a revised budget, and then you have to move really quickly to, pass a balanced budget by June 15th. And so I'm wondering, given that uncertainty, can you give us a sense of how you're thinking about putting together the budget, and may you have to, come back and make changes after June?
I think that is the question. I think that's exactly the question. And for me, what I have repeatedly said to folks that I've talked to and members of the caucus, the worst possible thing we could do is make cuts to the safety net that we ultimately didn't need to make. So I'm not eager to rush into any of these things. We may have to come back depending on what happens in Washington, and I think Senator Wiener laid it out very, very clearly in terms of just the levels of uncertainty here are crazy. There's a really high possibility that things that could profoundly impact our budget could happen in late September, early October when the legislature's not in session. So we're going to have to look at the situation we're facing. We're going to dig in, and our budget subcommittees are digging in right now. And we, for those of you that were part of this process last year, we had in excess of 80 hearings. So we're going to go through and we're going to examine every possible investment and where can we really be smart about how we use our scarce resources and do the most for the communities that are counting on us. But we may be in a position, despite what we do, where we have to come back and we have to make some adjustments. And so we're going to try to be really thoughtful about that process and really sensitive to the needs of those who are most vulnerable. And I'm hopeful, as happened last year, and again, we have a bunch of new members, but last year we really coalesced around this idea that in a tough budgetary environment, what we are going to preserve are our safety net programs. What we are going to try to do is protect our most vulnerable communities. And there's lots of other interesting and creative and worthy public policy ideas out there that people could get excited about in a different budgetary environment. But when we're in this moment, when everything is on the line, I'm hoping that we will again coalesce around protecting our most vulnerable communities.
Great to hear. would you like to add?
Yeah, so we ditto to a lot of what Jesse said. We're going through our very exhaustive hearing process as well. We know that we were putting the federal government aside, which is hard to do, but for the moment, for a minute, putting it aside, we were looking pretty good. We've now had, Medi-Cal has come in higher than anticipated, and so we took early action today to make sure that there's cash flow in the Medi-Cal program, and that's, we're certainly going to have to grapple with that for this budget, but it's all doable. It's all very doable, putting aside the feds, because they could just blow everything up, and again, we just don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of tough challenges ahead. So I want to remind everyone, if you'd like to ask a question, we're going to turn to audience questions. So please go ahead and write down your question and hold it up. Members of our team will relay them to me or put it in the conference app. So I want to shift gears now and talk about another major federal threat that has huge implications for California, and that is the Trump administration's relentless attack on immigrants. Obviously, California is home to more immigrants than any other state, and these attacks have been doing significant harm and creating a great deal of fear in communities across the state. And so in February, you approved new funding for legal services and immigration-related services. And I'm wondering if there are additional ways you think state leaders should respond to these attacks and defend immigrant communities.
Well, I think that, and I think we're probably not as budget chairs, but as members, very aligned here on the importance of legal services. And I know Member Gabriel has done legislation on that. It's really important for preventing homelessness, deportation, so many reasons. Having a lawyer makes all the difference in the world. I think it's also just very important for us to send signals to immigrant communities that we have your back. We're not all powerful. We can't, we don't have an army to stop, ICE or Border Patrol from doing horrible things. But what we can do is make clear that we're not going to collaborate with this deportation machine, whether it is in farmland areas, whether it is in schools, whether it's in the criminal justice system, whether it's on UC campuses, that we're not going to be part of that. And we want to make sure that communities actually trust that their state and local officials are on their side. So we can't stop it in its tracks in the way that we might want to, but we can reduce the risk, because it is, in addition to just the morality of it and what they're doing, if you have people who are don't want to go to school, don't want to send their kids to school, or don't want to go to, or scared to go to work, or scared to report a crime to the police, or scared to seek medical treatment, and I've seen stories, people scared to seek medical treatment because they think it's going to result in getting deported. It's immoral, but it's just so bad for our state and for our economy and for everything. I'm worried that, we have this profound housing shortage, and we don't have enough construction workers to begin with. So now, they're going to collapse the construction workforce. They're going to collapse the agricultural workforce. I know I'm very close with our janitors union in San Francisco, SEIU Local 87. These are folks who are some of the hardest working, salt of the earth people I've ever met. And they're scared. And people are scared to go to work. And that is just terrible for any society.
I will just add that California played a critical role in this during the first Trump administration, with our Attorney General stepping up and filing over 120 lawsuits. We were victorious in a lot of them. We made real progress in protecting communities. This is actually part of my origin story into the legislature. I sued the first Trump administration twice on behalf of Dreamers, including the case that went to the United States Supreme Court, where we were ultimately victorious. And this is, I will tell you, work that is deeply personable for many members of the legislature. We have folks who are formerly undocumented. We have folks who come from mixed status families. We have folks who, every time we are home, we are seeing it in our communities. We are hearing it from our friends and our neighbors and our loved ones. So it is very personal for a lot of folks. And I want to compliment our Attorney General, Rob Bonta, who I know has been out there working really hard in his team to be the tip of the spear to push back, both in this area and in other areas as it relates to our budget. So we had, as some of you may be may remember a few days ago they tried to cut $11 billion in public health funding, which would have been about $1 billion to California. And the Attorney General's office filed suit with some other states in a matter of hours and actually got an injunction to stop that. So we're going to step up. We appropriated those resources to the Attorney General's office and to nonprofits that are doing this work to protect the community. We have had conversations about doing more of that. I also want to compliment David Chu, the city attorney in San Francisco, who I know is doing a lot of work on this front to protect our immigrant community. So we're going to continue to push back on this front and to do the things that we can do through the federal courts. And I'm going to hope that we're going to have the same successful outcomes, because the work that the AG's office in California did and the work that our nonprofit legal providers did during the first administration made a huge difference. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do that again.
Great. So we've also, of course, seen from the Trump administration relentless attacks on the LGBTQ plus community, particularly the transgender community. And so wanted to ask the same question. What can state leaders do to defend and expand LGBTQ plus rights?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen anything like this. I can think back to one example a number of decades ago on another continent. But the idea that you have the President of the United States take the position that a certain class of people in the United States of America should not exist. Like, that's a really heavy thing to even get your head around. Just like saying, you don't exist. And you have this tiny group of people, like about 1% of the population, and they, 6 executive orders in the first 2 weeks. You come in as President of the United States with all the infinite number of problems we have, and you have this tiny group of people who are not hurting anyone, who are just trying to live their lives. 6 executive orders in 2 weeks targeting this group of people, and just perpetuating all of these vile slanders against trans people, that they're all faking it, and predators trying to get into women's spaces to try to assault people, just stuff that's just completely made up, and that just instigates violence against trans people. It just gives permission slips to people to say harm these people because they're a threat to society, or all this ridiculousness about sports, because they by the way, all of this with trans people, this is all, and there was a great expose a few years ago in the New York Times. In 2015, after decades, because I came up through the, as a young gay man and through the 90s and the early 2000s, when it was all about marriage. They did all these anti-marriage ballot measures. For those who were around, they blamed Gavin Newsom for George W. Bush winning re-election in 2004 because of marriage equality. It was all marriage, 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 because it used to be like trans people are now. It didn't poll as well as we would want. And then in 2015, they lost, and public opinion turned against them. So they literally did focus groups to say, how can we target queer people now? What's the next frontier? And it was trans people, particularly trans kids. And the thing that polls the worst is sports. And so they're out of 510,000 NCAA athletes. There are fewer than 10 who are trans, but they turned it into this huge national issue. So they've created danger, and so we're working to shore up our laws to, first of all, make sure we're protecting the privacy, data and medical privacy of trans people so they can't be targeted from other states using data that we have here. And we are also trying to strengthen our laws to make clear that we are not going to be enforcing these hate laws from other states. And unless the US Constitution requires us to do it, we're not extraditing anyone, we're not honoring subpoenas or warrants from the federal government, from other states, and we're gonna do everything we can to protect this community.
All right, we have them with us for a few more minutes. If you have questions, please get them up to me, and I'll be sure to ask them. So we like to ask this every year because it's helpful for our audience. Given the current budget context, I'm wondering if you can offer some top pieces of advice about how to lobby on the budget. What tips could you provide?
So, obviously, if you have a champion, if you have that, even just the one member who's willing to go to the mat and push and be irritating about it, that'll be, irritation can be a strength in the budget process. That's really important. Obviously, defending existing programs this year is going to be more effective than advocating for new. And what I, tell people who are advocating for new, I'm like, it's totally fine to have that in the hopper. You never, just in case things go way better than we thought. But chances are it's a tough year for new programs. And by the way, even before Trump got elected, we knew that in the subsequent few fiscal years, we have some real challenges. So, focusing on defending, whether it's defending or if it's an existing one that's expiring, trying to renew it, I think that's a better, the most effective use of one's time. And then also trying to be, when you're advocating for something, understanding that you can ask for whatever you want, but knowing what's the real bare minimum that you need, even though you're probably going to ask for more than bare minimum. That's just the nature of, human psychology. Knowing what that having your plan B and your plan C and your plan D if the full amount is not going to happen.
I will strongly agree with everything that the senator said, and we have a list of rules in our office, and rule number 7 is politics is about being the right amount of pushy. So don't be shy. You are fighting for worthy causes. You are fighting for communities that are counting on you. So do that work with all of the heart and energy that it deserves. The only thing I would add is be clear about prioritization, right? When people come in and they've got a list with 15 things on it, and there isn't a list of what's most important and what are the things that you really, really are prioritizing, it makes it more challenging, right? And if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And so we have asked for all of our diversity caucuses and all of the different members and interest groups that come in to see us, we'll have a conversation about everything on the list, but then tell us what your number 1, 2, 3 priorities are, but really tell us what the top priority is so we can help you. Because, and I know sometimes that can be a challenging conversation inside of a labor union or inside of a caucus or inside of a nonprofit where you have different constituencies and different communities you're trying to help. But ultimately, whatever you can share with folks on the budget committee, that will help us to help you to have a really clear understanding of what your priorities are. And I know that can be a difficult exercise internally. I know those can be difficult conversations internally, but I think they're important conversations to have. And then the other piece of advice I would give to advocates, in the assembly side, we lean very heavily on our budget subcommittee chairs. We are going to ask them to do a lot of the work in relationship with the policy committee chair and the members of their budget subcommittee. So one of the first questions I ask a member when they come up to me on the floor and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this budget request I say, have you talked to the budget subcommittee chair? And because that is a key part of this process. So as you are thinking about the programs and services that you want to advocate for, make sure you understand what budget subcommittee they fall under and make sure that you are spending some time with the budget subcommittee chair, because that person will have a very big voice in the process as we develop our budget blueprint on the assembly side.
Great, thank you. Super helpful tips. So we have a few questions here, and we're going to wrap up in just 5 minutes. Really important question here. How do we protect immigrant students being targeted by ICE?
And I've been, and I'm speaking for me, I've been very vocal about this. First of all, that I find it, as a Jew, that they're using this, in my view, this this pretext that they're doing this to combat anti-Semitism when this is a government that has literally been trying to elect Nazi-aligned governments in Europe. They tried and failed in Germany. They're trying now in France. And Elon Musk with his Nazi salute, and I could go on and on and on. This is about targeting universities first and foremost, and eviscerating universities, and targeting critical thinking, and targeting science, and targeting free speech. And so, and this is at the same time that we're seeing, the secret police coming out and sweeping up Venezuelan immigrants to send to the Gulag in El Salvador. And I know you all are paying close attention to all of this. It's just, it's terrifying. And it's not just about the people who are being targeted, it's about all of us. Because if they can target students who are here lawfully based on their view that you can agree or disagree with, if they can take people and deport them to a gulag in El Salvador with no due process and then claim, well, they're there so we can't do anything about it, that can happen to anyone. And so yes, it's about the students and others who are being targeted and deported for, often outrageous rationales, but it is about the pillars of democracy that we don't do that. We don't do that in this country. And so it's critically important for the UC and CSU and for these colleges to have their students' backs, to not be cooperating. And I just feel, I'm speaking for me, not as budget chair, just for me, that's what I think.
Great. So we're gonna close out here. I know we've got additional questions, but we've got to wrap up. So wanted to close out with on a little bit of a higher note, because we've talked about a lot of threats and challenges and uncertainty, and all of that's very real and important. But I wonder if to end on a little bit of a higher note, you could share one thing that gives you hope in this moment, or maybe one thing that you're really proud of that shows that California can make progress toward a stronger, more equitable state for all people.
So let me just say thank you to all of you again for being up here. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. And thank you for the work that all of you are doing in the communities across the state. I will say one of the high points of this experience, as challenging as it's been, and I know we've had a lot of heavy conversation today, but part of what gives me hope is that people in California we're not going to roll over. We're not going to lay down. We are going to stand up and we're going to fight like hell for our democracy, for our planet, for our communities, for all of the things that we believe are important in this world. And one of the really high points of this experience, and I mean it very sincerely, has been the opportunity to work with Senator Wiener, and I think you've heard that today. We represent very different communities. I'm a exhausted suburban dad of 3 little kids, and he's having a lot of fun in the Castro. So we're 2 different people, but I think we are aligned on a mission of healing the world, of repairing the world, of trying to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. And it has just been an absolute pleasure. And just watching you answer the question about the LGBTQ community and the work you've done there, Scott, you're incredible, and it's an honor to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and the feeling is mutual, and it does help when you have budget chairs who are able to communicate, and we very open. Even we don't always agree on everything, but it's been a real pleasure. So back at you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone loves proclaiming the death of California. It's been happening forever. And actually, San Francisco, they really love proclaiming the death of San Francisco. It's like a national pastime. You could have a coffee table book with all of the proclamations of San Francisco's death. But California in general, going back decades, it's always oh, the state's over, California's past its prime. And every time we come roaring back. And so, Hollywood's going to come roaring back in LA. We're going to have BART is going to come roaring back in the Bay Area. We're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it if we all stick together. And we're a very cantankerous state. We have a lot of disagreements, and we yell at each other, and it's good. It's great. It's like democracy at its finest. But what I know about this state is that there are people who, in dealing with some of the fascist threats that we're dealing with coming from DC, there are people who I don't always get along with or don't see eye to eye with, but we're just together on this. And that's what needs to happen in California. It just needs to lock arms, and we can argue about all the stuff we argue about later, and we can argue a little bit about it now, but we have an existential threat, and I have confidence that California is up to the task.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much. Let's please thank Assemblymember Gabriel and Senator Wiener for your time. Really appreciate you joining us today. To the workshop rooms next. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.